Just as the movie press was getting ready to go home for the weekend, a big bombshell rumor hit that everyone was required to cover the hell out of because it's tangentially related to the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and that's all anyone wants to read about anymore. Seriously, I don't know what'll happen to film reporting if they ever stop making these movies. We can't all just transition over to Let's Plays. Anyway, the big maybe news, singer-actress Zendaya, who, according to younger members of my family, is apparently a person who exists and appears on something like 50 shows I've never heard of on the Disney Channel, previously thought to be playing a new or obscure character in the upcoming feature Spider-Man Homecoming, is actually playing the very well-known character of Mary Jane Watson. Allegedly. Though if this wasn't true, it's turned into such a big deal you'd kind of imagine Marvel would be saying something about it, but still, technically a rumor at this time, yes. As you might imagine, this has turned into a very big deal, because Mary Jane Watson in the comics is a white girl with red hair and Zendaya is black. Or rather, she is of mixed race descent, but since this conversation is playing out in American popular culture, with our pathological aversion to nuance very much in play, yeah, the story is playing out that Spider-Man Homecoming's Mary Jane is now black. And while that'd probably be a big deal anyway, since Homecoming is effectively a Marvel movie that Marvel Studios is generously letting Sony pretend they had any real say over, thus meaning that the official now and forever Mary Jane Watson of the Marvel Cinematic Universe is black. As goes without saying, this has made some people very, very angry, as every change ever made in the process of adapting comic books into movies has always made at least one person very, very angry. But since, as you may have heard, old-fashioned out-and-proud racism is having something of a comeback in the United States this year, the idea of recasting white characters with non-white actors inevitably gets such things swept up into the maelstrom of discussion topics among that one Breitbart reading friend you still have on Facebook, who likes to crowd your timeline with unfunny memes about white genocide. Honestly, I don't see what the big deal is. Well, okay, I kind of understand what the big deal is, I just don't agree that it should be a big deal. I'm as fond of sticking to the source material as anyone, but on the long list of aesthetic concerns, the ethnicity of a given character is pretty damn low on that list, excepting those instances where race or national origin actually are intrinsic to the character, or when it would mean deleting one of the rare non-white characters who exist in the first place. To put it another way, I really don't give a shit when they swap white characters into something else for the sake of diversity or even just because. It's fine. We have plenty of white stuff. White culture will be just fucking fine. Now look, yes, there are times where this kind of colorblind casting might actually invite more logical leaps than it might be worth. For example, there's nothing that says Batman has to be white, but since a bunch of the logistics of his mythos rely on Bruce Wayne's family being this long-standing financial aristocracy in Gotham City, there's not really a lot of history of non-white families holding that kind of old money legacy in the US, and, well, at the very least, I'm suddenly more interested in Thomas Wayne's life story than his weirdo kid with the bat fetish. But either way, that's a really specific circumstance involving a pretty detailed character. By contrast, despite being around for about 50 years now, Mary Jane isn't exactly well defined. Like most other members of a superhero's non-costume supporting cast, she tends to be whatever the plot needs her to be, both in terms of her day-to-day life and even her backstory. Hell, she didn't even really get a backstory for almost 20 years, and when she got one, there was almost nothing in it that specifically required to be white or even a redhead. In fact, you want to know the only reason why MJ looks like she does? Because the payoff to the long-running Mystery Date storyline was set up to be Mary Jane turns out to be the hottest chick Peter has ever seen, and John Romita decided the best way to visualize that was to draw Anne Margaret from Bye Bye Birdie. So the only canonical physical requirement of Mary Jane is that she be super attractive, and since this actress looks like she's about 15, I don't really have an opinion to offer on that front because I'm not Glenn Quagmire. The fact of the matter is, it's 2016, we live in an increasingly diverse world, and even if the growing coalition of hinterland cultural flotsam and alt-right weirdos can cobble together the votes to make Agent Orange president, that trend ain't reversing anytime soon. If the popular culture wants to reflect reality enough to stay relevant with the audience, properties need to embrace that once in a while. The Marvel Cinematic Universe built a lot of its brand catering to nostalgia, and it'll likely still do that going forward, but the new Spider-Man has been from the outset framed as something aimed at revitalizing a thoroughly tarnished franchise for the current version of that younger audience. Peter Parker's story has always appealed best to teenagers after all, and the young audience of today largely lives in a world and experiences a popular culture that looks a lot more like Homecoming's vision of the world than a strict adaptation of comics from the 60s would, especially if they're going to a public high school in Queens like Spider-Man supposedly is. Besides, if you're going to nitpick this shit, at least be consistent. Are you also upset that Marissa Tomei isn't an 80-year-old Irish woman, or that Tom Holland is British and not actually from New York, or that none of these actors are actually in fucking high school? Let's have some perspective, please.